Hi, everybody. Wow, look at this full house. Are you here for stories and chocolate? That's what I'm here for. Yay, thanks so much for joining us for this very special edition of the Story Collider. Tonight we have some fun chocolate pairings. I'm going to let Bryan explain that to you because I don't want to deprive him of all that fun. Because I'm giving like that, yeah. My name is Rebecca Stummy. I'm the senior producer of live programming and events here at LAist, and I'm so happy to see all of your faces. I'm going to introduce you to your host for this evening. He's going to explain what's going on with the chocolates, what's going on with the storytelling tonight, and that duty goes to your host for the evening, Bryan Kett.
Hi, I'm Bryan. Welcome to Story Collider. Thank you for being here. The house is full. I love it. By round of applause, who has been to a Story Collider show before? Okay. And who is here for the first time? I don't know what to do with that data, but it's called qualitative data. So to the first group, welcome back. To the second group, where have you been? It's so good to see you. We have a very special night. We do this a couple times a year here. Just for some housekeeping, so Story Collider, we are a nonprofit organization. We are based in New York City, and we have shows all around the country and all over the UK. And these stories that we share at these shows are all science-based. The mission of our organization is to help humanize science through personal narrative, because science really does impact all of us, right? So we have these shows, we have storytellers come up here, share a part of themselves. Some of them are scientists working in their respective fields. Some of them are just regular folks, just who have something to share. So you're gonna see both of those tonight. It's very fun. Every show has a theme. Tonight's theme is that of first impressions, which is a great theme because I picked it. And thematically, though, we're kind of all about that first step, that initial foray, that like first kind of general meeting or whatever that may be. And that really permeates through all of these. So we just hope you see a reflection of yourselves in it. And because Becca was kind enough to give me the onus of explaining this. So we have partnered with this wonderful organization called the Chocolate Dispensary. They're out of Echo Park. And all of you should have 4 pieces of chocolate in front of you right now, okay? Don't eat them yet. This is like, I was told in the lobby, this is like the marshmallow test, where it's, you put the marshmallow, and if you wait, you get another one. So that's a big predictor of success, is it not, right? Isn't that the thing? So you're all successful. Don't eat it yet, because after each story, I'm going to read kind of the thematic pairing to it, and also all the actual taste notes, and then we're going to enjoy it, and we're going to observe this together. A little bit about the Chocolate Dispensary. So, Chocolate Dispensary and Taste Rooms, curating Southern California's largest collection of ethically sourced and sustainably made craft chocolates. The owners, Dale and Kala, fell in love with chocolate and politics. That's how I know them. They've made it their mission to bring moments of bliss and joy to people's lives through delicious chocolate. Dale and Kala, are you in here right now? They're back there. They are doing this just for community, for all of this. They're selling bars in the lobby. They're going to have packages of, and I'll say this at the end too, of the 4 bars we try. Think about your holiday gifts. They have other bars. They have this wonderful spread. Can I also get one? I didn't get one yet, just not right now, but I didn't think ahead. Thanks, Dale. My bad. They have 90 makers, more than 90 makers. They have more than 600 types of chocolate. It's right in Echo Park, right down there near the coffee shops. And they're going to give you something that will delight and inspire you. Their store is open 7 days a week during the holidays, right there in the heart of Echo Park. And their entire inventory is also available online at thechocolatedispensary.com. Again, they're selling after. I will say more about that. Just don't eat it yet. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell a quick story, just because it's about me. And just on the theme of first impressions, just to almost orient us around this too. So here's the thing. When I moved out here from Chicago 10 years ago, I didn't know anyone, and I was always alone, and I felt so lonely, and it was brutal. And the thing is, scientifically, like in an evolutionary sense too, we need community. And when we're in community, we experience oxytocin's release. It's a hormone that makes us feel good, right? And I was depleted, and I really wanted that. So I decided I'm going to go out and I'm going to make friends. But making friends as an adult is really difficult. It feels like the cement is already dried at that point. I tried going on friend dates. That felt really forced. And I tried using meetup.com, which is a website that helps strangers to attend events together. But every time I went to one of those events, I was never sure who else was from meetup.com. Like, it wasn't labeled. So I would just sit by myself, which was not the point. And things felt really hopeless. But then one evening, I was going to go on a friend's date. I was going to meet someone for drinks. I didn't want to drive. I decided to take an Uber. But when I opened the Uber app, there was an icon I had never seen before. It was a car with two people next to it for a new type of ride called Uber Pool. And if you're unfamiliar, Uber Pool pairs up two strangers heading in the same direction to ride together. And Uber saw this as a way to be really efficient. I saw it as a way to make a friend organically. I imagine being driven somewhere there and stopping to pick up another rider and the two of us talking and hitting it off and becoming best friends, and it was going to be easy. So even though I own a car, I just started taking Uber Pool all around the city. But it didn't make any difference because at that time, no one else knew about it. Like, I was the only one. I just rode around for months by myself until one night when I'm in the back of this Uber and my driver's phone pings with a notification to pick up another rider, and I was stunned. And I asked him about it, and he was stunned too. He had never done it. And he scratches his beard, and he goes, yeah, it looks like we're picking up a woman named Kalinda. And I thought, Kalinda, like, that's an interesting name, okay. And then my driver said, and I'm going to hook you up. And I said, please don't do anything weird, because I was not the pathetic guy riding around in an Uber to get dates. I was the pathetic guy riding around in an Uber to make friends, and there is a difference. But he was having none of this. He took the passenger seat, moved it all the way forward. Then he pulled over to pick up Kalinda, and she tried to get in the front seat next to him, as one would expect. But he said, sorry, it's stuck all the way up. You have to get in the back with Bryan. And as she walked around the car, he gave me this big thumbs up, and I just began sweating. And then Kalinda got in next to me, and like me, she was in her early 30s, but unlike me, she was wearing a bathrobe. And she had on this necklace with these gigantic crystals, like the size of plums. And her hair was this translucent blonde, and it was styled straight up like a troll doll, and it was pushing into the roof of the car. And her eyes, my God, she was wearing contact lenses that made her eyes look all black, like the eyes of a shark. But in spite of all this, I'm like, okay, well, the bathrobe has a function, and these are all stylistic choices. And if I judge people by first impressions, the theme of this show, that I'm never going to make any friends. So I'm going to give this a shot. I told myself I can do this. So I turned to her. I said, hi. And she responded by just running her hand over her crystals. And she said, I am resonating at such a high frequency tonight. And I thought, no, I can't do this. And so for the next half an hour, I was trapped in the back of this Uber as Kalinda, this is true, told me about how she was not mortal. And then she asked if I knew what she was talking about. I said, yeah, not mortal, totally. And the whole time, the driver kept looking at me in the rearview mirror and raising his eyebrows to be like, it's going pretty well, huh? And so eventually we got to my destination. I ran from the car. I was scared, but not scared enough to stop taking Uber Pool, because right around that time it became super popular. And every time I took it, I'd be paired with someone else, but no friendships ever came from it. It was just small talk, so I swore it off. It wasn't worth it. But then like a year and a half later, I was on the other side of the city. I was coming home late one night, hadn't driven, went to order an Uber, accidentally ordered an Uber Pool instead, and came to get me. I was in the back. We're moving along. All's well. And then my driver's phone pinged with a notification to pick up someone else for the pool. And so we pulled over to get them, but they didn't get in the front seat next to the driver, which you would expect. Like, they chose to get in the back seat with me. And when they did, I looked over at them and my heart stopped, because I saw a bathrobe. I saw a crystal necklace, saw troll hair. It was Kalinda. And she turned to me with her shark eyes, and in this voice that just sounded like death itself said, I thought that would be you again. It's like, oh my God. And then she said, Bryan. It's like, have you been looking for me for the past year and a half, just riding around in Ubers in a city of 4 million people? It's terrifying. And true to form, she began talking about how she wasn't mortal, and I began to kind of believe her. And our driver didn't think this was strange. He thought we were two old friends reconnecting. So he didn't think it was odd when Kalinda said, Bryan, do you appreciate wolves? And it's like, sure. If you're asking that question, you're probably into wolves. And I turned to face the door, right? And I had to think, like, well, here's what I asked for. Right, here's a person who wants a friend just like I do. But then it dawned on me that maybe Kalinda felt lonely too, and maybe seeing her again was some sort of sign, and maybe I should give this potential friendship like a chance. And because here she was, a person, an adult in the world, wanting the same thing, wanting community, wanting oxytocin, wanting to feel good, wanting to belong. And so I turned back to face her when I noticed that she had scooted closer to me. And then I watched she scooted closer again and again, and I thought, no, I can't do this. And so even though we were like a mile from my apartment, I said, this is me, and I got out at midnight in front of a used cell phone store. Right before the door closed, she said, see you next time. So on my walk home, I had a lot of time just to reflect upon things, and making friends as an adult is really difficult, but being an adult also involves learning about yourself, and this event really did teach me a great deal. Like, I have found my oxytocin elsewhere. I'm finding it right here, right now, with all of you. I have a community. I appreciate and love all of you, but this event also taught me just to really appreciate my alone time. It's quite nice. It lets me reflect, right? Because here's the takeaway, is that being alone doesn't have to mean that you're lonely, right? That's the last time I ever took an Uber pool, but on nights like tonight, when the moon is full, like, I can feel Kalinda out there in the greater Los Angeles area, just running her hand over her crystals and waiting to join someone else's ride. And who knows, maybe that someone will be you. So there you have it. There's a stupid story to start. I promise you don't have to clap, whatever. The other stories are much better. Okay, the other stories are by people who are far more adept, and now we're going to meet them. So, when I wrote our first storyteller, this was months ago, about doing the show, I emailed her. Her email auto-response was, I'm in Springfield, Illinois to put on a beekeeper suit and cover myself in cicadas. I'll get back to you later. So getting that response, how could you not be like, yeah, this person needs to do this show? She has brought science comedy to more than 2 million learners worldwide. She's a STEM professional. She researched humans and cocaine, held brains in her hands, created 3-story lightning bolts, and worked with skunks. Who hasn't? Her work as an actor, improviser, vocalist, and international speaker spans 2 decades, stage and screen crowds of 3 to 15,000. She's performed improv, musical theater, and Shakespeare across the country, including the American Repertory Theater and the Second City. Please welcome our first teller. Give her a big round of applause, because here's the thing. I killed it, obviously, right? But it's always good to get that lift right up top. So please give a warm welcome to our first teller, Sophie Schrand.
I went to college in Boston to study 2 very compatible subjects, behavioral neuroscience and theater. Hear me out. Neuroscience and theater inform each other. They're both looking at the same thing, essentially, why we do what we do, our relationships with each other, and how we fit into the bigger picture of being humans on this planet. So here's an example. One of my favorite neurotopics was theory of mind. It's a psychological development stage that typically begins around age 2 or 3, when we start to realize that other people have thoughts, and they have thoughts about us. We start to wonder how others see us, how they perceive us, how they are thinking about us, how we are judged. That human awareness of what others think of us, that need to know, is foundational to theater, the art of storytelling. I love that. And I love it so much that I combine these fields to create a career in science comedy with the goal of creating human connection, curiosity, and compassion. Yay! Thank you. So all of these things were on my mind when I was back in school, and I picked up a new book by my then favorite author. I very romantically took it on the train with me. Picture this, a budding scientist and theater artist riding public transit with a story to read, until page 2, when I realized that this was not their next novel, but a firsthand account of his undercover investigation into factory farming in America. Yeah. Right there on the Green Line in Boston, it was like a switch flipped for me. Suddenly, my evidence-loving brain was flooded with facts about a subject I really hadn't examined: food. It turns out that the way we produce food in modern America has very little connection or compassion to the planet. So right there, I looked up from a chapter on industrial cow feeding operations, and I thought, no, thank you. And that was it. Almost 20 years later, I know, I look so young, I'm fully vegan, and I've been neurosing about it ever since. Not about being vegan, but about what you'll think about me being vegan. and about what you'll think I'll think about you being or not being vegan. Theory of mind. Because for whatever reason, when it comes to what we choose to eat or not eat, people's reactions can vary wildly. When I tell somebody that I'm vegan, it can go anywhere from full acceptance to complete defense mode or attack mode. Now, most people respect it, but I'll notice the little eye roll or the smirk or the tiny sigh. I've been to weddings where the vegan option was chicken. My brother, who loves me very much, would eat bacon in my face and go, bacon! Some people would think that what I choose to eat is an attack on the way they choose to eat, which is all illogical, but the emotional and cultural ties of food are so strong that sometimes facts or evidence or science can take a back seat. Food is powerful that way. So many years later, I moved to Los Angeles, a vegan haven, which is not why I moved here. I moved here to keep making science comedy on TV and create human connection, curiosity, and compassion. The food scene was a bonus. But I did move here right before the strikes, which was not a great time for connection or compassion in the industry, and I felt pretty lonely as the new kid. But it was a good time to be an independent filmmaker, which I am. So I thought, what can I do to meet the moment here? One day, while I was looking for a car, because I lived in LA now, an idea struck me like lightning. I would drive an electric car from Los Angeles to Boston and back and film the whole thing. I would go out looking for the science of sustainable travel and meet people from all walks of life and find reasons to feel hopeful amidst the climate crisis. I would leave LA to connect with the rest of America, and then I would film it as a documentary. This would be my biggest experiment yet. So I gathered my team to map the route and prep cameras and fundraise and book lodging and guest interviews and troubleshoot things like where we would need to charge and what I was gonna eat. Because I lived in LA where there's a vegan burger on every block, but I was about to travel 7,000 miles over 25 states. So who would I meet and what would I eat? Over months of pre-production, I steeled my body and soul for 2 months of Taco Bell bean burritos. And then we hit the road. So now, it is day 2 of this 49-day journey. After a long day of filming and driving, my team is winding down at a campsite in Bryce Canyon, Utah. I am toasting a little vegan marshmallow as we map out the plan for the next day. When out of the darkness saunters a large, leathery man with a tan and a Texan drawl and a big old hat and big old boots and a big gulp full of booze. And he sidles up to the campfire and introduces himself as Cowboy Bit. Turns out, Cowboy Bit and my producer had been planning a horseback ride through Bryce Canyon the following day to film the landscape. And Bit had a surprise for me. He looks up at the night sky, takes a big gulp, and invites me to his authentic reproduction 1800s chuck wagon. Now, if you've never been to a chuck wagon or lived in the 1800s, a chuck wagon is essentially the original food truck. It is a kitchen on wheels that followed and fed the cowboys as they boyed the cows. So here's math. Cowboy plus chuck wagon equals meat. And Bit is the cowboyest cowboy to have ever cowboyed in my mind. I mean, he's got a steel toothpick in his mouth and he has dust on his hands. He is every inch a cowboy. So I'm gonna tell this man that I don't eat meat. Yes, this is where I need to say, no, thank you. So I say, absolutely, thank you. So kind. Wow, how generous. Oh, amazing. See you in the morning. Yes, enjoy the stars. The next morning, we set out on a full day of adventure and filming and a full day of opportunities to tell this man the truth. We are riding horses through Bryce Canyon. It's majestic. We're talking about land stewardship and water conservation, that's going pretty well. Maybe I could work the vegan thing in here, or I could point out those trees. Look at those rocks. How old is this horse? Oh my gosh, the air is so clean. About halfway through the ride, I realize we are behind schedule. Maybe we won't have time to go to the chuck wagon, and I can avoid this conversation entirely? Nope, because Cowboy Bit is prompt, dang it. He's already got his team hitching up the horses to the other wagon that we're going to drive to the chuck wagon in the woods. All I have to do now is dress for the occasion. Bit hands me a brown muslin frock, which I am voluntold to put on for the cameras. But I'm a theater kid, so yes. Now I'm an authentic, period-appropriate secret vegan. Bit offers me a hand, and I go up beside him on the reins in the wagon, and off we go. If I had an 1800s pocket watch, it would be ticking. We are in costume. Bit is teaching me how to steer. We're talking about environmental science as we clip-clop closer to a chuck wagon full of meat. Bit turns to me and he says, you know, they really had to know Mother Nature back then. They might not have called it science, but it was. And I think, tell him now, tell him right now. And I say, science is everywhere. Bit says, you know, it's inspiring really to think that when we can put our minds to something, we can accomplish all things. And I think, like, tell the truth to one person, to a new person that you just met. Just tell the truth like that. We could do that. And I say, so true. And Bit says, and as we say on the chuck wagon, some lessons cost more than others. And I think, like telling lies. Lying is bad. A lie of omission is still a lie, so you should just tell this man right now, just the simple truth. And I say, Now, we are getting closer and closer, and Bit steers the horses to the right. The chuck wagon is almost in sight. And he turns to me and he says, ready to eat? We got everything cooking up on the cast irons right now as we ride. We got some real nice eggs and bacon. How does that sound? And I say, I have a confession to make. And he says, vegetarian? My empty little stomach drops. This man has been offering me something that I really, really want, right? A heck of a story for this documentary, the different walk of life that I was hoping to find, and something I really, really, really don't want. And I say, vegan. And that's it. It's over. Oh my God. Okay, show canceled. Experiment failed. Take me home. Just turn the chuck wagon around. I'm going to go back to the lab and forget I ever cared about connection or compassion because clearly I cannot do this. And it's bacon all over again. So just take me home. Which I did not say. I just thought in the fraction of a second before Bit says, well, that's all right. I don't look down on that at all. I actually think that's a good thing. I eat less and less meat as time goes on. And I say, nothing, because I am stunned. Bit says, I just wish you'd told me earlier. I would have made you something different. But I think we got everything we need to make an apple cobbler. How's that? Turns out that Bit the cowboy cooks vegan from the chuck wagon all the time. And more people are requesting vegan and vegetarian meals from the chuck wagon. If only I'd told him earlier. In a wave of relief, I admitted why it took me so long. I was afraid that he would judge me. And then Bit says something that I still think about to this day. He says, well, you know, ain't that a great point? How often are we all guilty of assuming we know something about a culture that we really don't? It led to a really cool conversation. We had different opinions about food. We had different definitions of sustainability. But it wasn't divisive. It didn't even feel particularly emotional. It was a thoughtful and kind, dare I say, fun conversation between two new friends who gently challenged each other. We both had a lot to think about. I was a country and 2 decades away from the Green Line, there on that wagon, and another switch flipped for me. I had been afraid to say no, afraid to speak up, afraid to say the truth because I was biased. It was a lesson that I needed to learn on day 2 of this 2-month trip so that I could let my guard down. Because if my goal was human connection and curiosity and compassion, that meant confronting my own misconceptions. My own theory of mind had gotten in the way. I sat there on that chuck wagon for hours after we filmed. I stayed way longer than I was supposed to, and I put us way behind schedule. As Bit and I shot the breeze, I wondered what else would surprise me on this 7,000-mile electric journey if only I could be open to others and be open to their openness in return. So I sat there in delight, deep in the woods of Bryce Canyon, the cast irons on the fire, with my new friend Cowboy Bit. And I did the only thing I could do. I took another bite of a dang good apple cobbler. Thanks.
Give it up for Sophie, let her hear it. The cobbler got me thinking when I was in high school, you had to take, like how to cook 101 or whatever, and we learned how to make pies, and I was really into making pies for a bit there, like from scratch. Like there was a, 15-year-old boys, 2 months for that period. I was like, I love making pies. And it was right before Thanksgiving. I was at a friend's house, and we were like, let's make a pie. And so we made a pie from scratch, lattice top, the whole works, but didn't have a filling. And then we're just like, why don't we just put this can of mandarin oranges in it? So we did that. That's all we had. We did that. And then we just baked the pie, and then we forgot about it. And then his family ate it at Thanksgiving, and everyone threw up. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this chocolate tasting thing, okay? So if you're looking at the chocolate, the white chocolate, that's number 3, okay? So orient it however you see fit. So if that's 3, right, the end right next to it is 4. The other side is 1, which is where we're starting. Do we have our bearings? Cool. So here we go. This is an homage to Sophie's story right here, this idea of expectations, because many people really do expect dark chocolate to be bitter, but that is not the case. I'm going to tell you why. Right here we have Louisa Abrams' 70% dark Rio Tocantins. It's out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. So Louisa Abrams is a master with a mission. She partners with native riverside communities in the Brazilian Amazon to gather wild forage golden cacao pods, champion biodiversity, and preserve the rainforest. Her gorgeous chocolates, exclusively crafted in small batch production, are mixed with wild-grown cacao and organic cane sugar. This is a staff favorite at the Chocolate Dispensary. They claim it to be one of the most beautiful examples of pure dark chocolate they've ever tasted. They're citrusy. I was housing this before any of you got here. It's such a good time. Let's all enjoy it together, shall we? Let's. And they're also selling this after by the bar. Wait for that citrusy note. That hits you on the end. Oh, and it's vegan. How's that for Italian? Never thought how enjoyable it would be just to eat in front of a bunch of people. All dark chocolate is vegan? Unless you put honey in it, it's by nature vegan. That's wonderful. Okay, thank you. Next teller. Our next storyteller came to us through LAist. Our next storyteller is Distilled Sunshine. I'll stand by that. She's a lifelong Angelino, growing up in Compton, attending Cal State Long Beach. She spent 13 years working in film and TV production, executive assistant, production coordinator on various series and films. Later, she co-owned a construction company. What can she do? Which developed and built single-family homes across LA. Please give a very warm welcome. I'm so excited she's here. She's just the best. Please give it up for Joanne Higgins.
I grew up in Compton with my best friend Claudia, and I adored Claudia's family because her family was actually very different than my family. We both had sisters, and we both had like 2 brothers that really tolerated us. And both of our fathers went to work every day. My father worked as a shipping foreman, and he wore a gray uniform to work every day, carrying a black lunch pail under his arm. Men during that time had very different kinds of jobs where they wore uniforms, like they were chauffeurs or cooks or janitors. Claudia's father wore a suit and tie to work. And this made me very curious about what he did for a living. I soon found out that he was an aerospace engineer. And that meant you could wear a suit and tie to work. He worked for North American Aviation, and he used to design rocket hardware and airplane hardware. My mother was an ER nurse, and her uniform was white. It was white from head to toe and had this white hat that she wore. She loved nursing, she loved medicine, she loved science. She was studying all the time. And as any parent, she hoped that one day one of her kids, me, because I was the oldest, would follow in her footsteps and become either a nurse or a doctor. The thing was, I had absolutely no interest in becoming a nurse or a doctor. I didn't like science. I didn't like medicine. I hated hospitals. But that did not stop her from trying to encourage me. So one day she said to me, why don't you volunteer as a candy striper at the hospital where I work? And I thought about the candy striper uniform. It was like pink and white, and it had the white hat. So you looked like a perfect piece of candy cane. And I thought, oh, wow, this is awesome. I can be a candy striper, and I can make my mother really proud. So I said, okay, how hard can it be? I will just, read to patients, pass out magazines, fluff pillows. I'm good. The first day I show up for my candy striper assignment, my mother lets me know I am going to be in the ER with her. I was mortified, but I could not let her know that I was upset. I wanted to show that I could really hang. But deep down, I was not feeling it at all. When we went into the emergency, I saw like all of these things dangling from the ceiling, and there was all this beeping noise, and there was so much cotton. I've never seen so much cotton. So I'm waiting, and I'm looking for an escape route. I'm like, how can I get out of here without being noticed? Then all of a sudden, the paramedics come through with a shot victim on a gurney. The place goes crazy. It turns into a MASH unit. Everybody is scattering everywhere. I get a glimpse of my mother as she turns into a superhero. She was good. But I just wanted out. All of a sudden, I see a place to go. I move to it, and someone moves me out of the way. And I'm freaking out. Then somebody yells, "Get that girl out of here." And I vowed never to involve myself with medicine or science again. So in 2016, when my godfather, Charlie, who used to wear the suit and tie to work because he worked in aerospace, when I found out he was in the hospital, I was reminded of that very failed ER experience. So I swallowed hard before I walked into the room, accompanied by his daughter, Claudia, who was my best friend. As soon as I saw him, I was just elated because he was great. He was holding court, explaining to the nurse that he wanted to know every aspect of the IV drip. While I was there, a colleague of his from the old days came, and they're sitting and they're talking, and I'm listening, and they start talking about working in aerospace in the 1960s. And I realized I knew Charlie worked in aerospace in the 1960s, but then he said something about working on the Apollo program and this little thing like sending men to the moon. And I had never heard him talk about this. So I was really intrigued. And without even asking, I took my phone and I taped their conversations. My curiosity was really piqued, and I listened intently as they started talking about all the innovations that happened. But then the conversation turned dark because they talked about racism and discrimination in the workplace and how they had to work really hard, yet they had to deal with all of this negative stuff while trying to send men to the moon. And I thought, this is really interesting. I felt like I was getting like new information. This isn't what they teach you in school when they teach you about the Apollo program. They teach you everything was awesome, the race to space. But there clearly was another side. So I thought, okay, if I don't know about this, other people probably don't know about it either. And perhaps it's something that I could share. That's when I got my idea about telling Charlie's story. I became frantic about researching it. And without knowing it, I actually started developing like this kind of research study to really scientifically get data and information to prove to tell the story that I wanted to tell, which was to look at the 1950s and 1960s and show how the country was embroiled in civil rights while trying to send men to the moon. I started talking to Charlie on the phone every night, and there were always so many incredible things that he had to tell me, and I was really eager to listen. He'd like dangle bits of information like a fisherman, like bait, and he'd go, what about this? And it was always to keep me coming back for more, and I was coming back for more. But what I really started to understand was, right before my eyes, I was connecting science and history. And I was excited. I started really having fun with it, this research that I was doing. And then Charlie, at one point, said, why would you like to know some other people that are involved? And I was like, sure. Who? And he says, oh, I know a black rocket scientist. And would you like to talk to a real astronaut? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'd love to. I was thrilled when the real astronaut he had me talk to was Ed Dwight, who was the first black astronaut in the 1960s. he was tapped by President Kennedy to be the first Black astronaut to go to the moon. And I had a conversation with him on the phone. It was so great. So I was having a great time. Charlie knew I was having a great time. Charlie was having a great time. We were both feeding off of each other. So Charlie came to me and said, hey, there's this organization, the Aerospace Legacy Foundation, Aerospace Legacy Foundation, and they have this annual meeting and they keep inviting me, but I'm not going to it. But I was thinking I'd go if you go with me. And I'm like, why do you want to go? And he said, well, I want to talk about the way we were treated in aerospace. And this is a good platform for me to do it. They don't seem to be acknowledging the fact that people of color played a really integral part in the legacy. And I really want to correct that. So I thought, this is great. And then I thought, ooh, this will be good for me with regard to my research, because it could be a culmination of my research ending up here. So I said, okay. And so in March of 2019, I find myself in the most auspicious place, a Golden Corral in Anaheim, California, with 22 aerospace engineers. And their ages range from 93 to 78. And Charlie is the oldest. He's 93. So they're all like gathered in this space, and they're fixing their chairs and their tables, and Charlie and I are setting up the microphones and getting ready for him to speak. As soon as they get settled, you can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet. It's like a showdown at the Golden Corral. So the organizer announces the first speaker, who's Charlie, and he gets up very deliberately, like a gunslinger. And the first thing he says is, I'm here to champion the contributions that Black people made in aerospace. And you start to hear all these grumbles and all this shuffling and all this disruption. It's like they don't really want to hear what he has to say. So he looks over at me and he gives me this kind of wry smile, knowing, because we both thought it might turn out this way. He still tries to continue, but they were not having it. They just scoffed at whatever he was trying to say. He felt deflated, and he decided to just sit down. I felt so badly for him. I really wanted this to turn out very differently. But he was kind of used to it. So I started thinking about this moment, and I thought, I related to him as a woman, like trying to speak and not quite being heard. But as a researcher, witnessing this 93-year-old warrior take a stand, really, it resonated with me. That moment stayed with me, even today. And I realized that the journey of space and life's journey are very similar. And they both provide like these amazing things that can happen in life for you. Like sending somebody to the moon. And I also discovered that you can change your mind about things. Like I changed my mind about science and hospitals. And I went from being afraid and frightened to actually embracing it. So I figured if I could do that, perhaps these men could do that and do that for Charlie. And that's why I felt it was so important to share Charlie's story. And I'm very happy to announce the podcast, The Other Moonshot, will launch January 2025. And I just want to thank all the lucky stars that supported me. Thank you.
Give Joanne a round of applause. That podcast, January 29th, it's with LAist. That's how Joanne came to us. I was thinking, the recording, years ago, I was sitting at, I think it was Christmas Eve, my grandma was there, and she's like, what are you doing for New Year's Eve? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to just some dumb bar in Chicago with friends. And she goes, well, in 1952, I went. She told me all these things she did on New Year's, and it was just so much cooler. Everything, it was way better than me. Here's the thing. Chocolate number 2. We found it. This is an homage to Joanne's story. This is Seattle Chocolate's Moon Rocks milk chocolate. You'll soon know why. Send your taste buds to the moon and back. With an out-of-this-world flavor experience, not only will you encounter the creamiest milk chocolate this side of the Milky Way, but buckle in for a wild ride with bits of popping candy that go blasting off like a tickle of a meteor shower in your mouth. It's truly an adventure with every bite. Seattle Chocolate donates 10% net profits to Girls Inc., inspiring all girls to be strong, smart, and bold. Love it. I'm going to eat it right now. Maybe you already have. Here we go. We'll see. Lovely. Storyteller number 3. So our next teller, he's a television writer. He's a 2.5-time Moth Grand Slam champion. He's also a recovering mascot. He was Otto the Orange at Syracuse. You might recognize him from that. He also named Otto, isn't that true? He's the guy who named Otto. He's a dear friend of mine. I asked for this story. I always get what I want. That's why he's here. He's a comedy writer. I will say this, though. The funniest thing he has ever done was he once texted me and invited me to go to a Counting Crows concert. This was like a year ago. So this is like, he like follows them, subscribes to their emails, got a Counting Crows email, looked up the dates, cleared it on his schedule, and then reached out to me to go. I said no, obviously. But please welcome my friend, Ron Hart. Give it up for him.
That was lovely. That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
For the record, he was like the 9th guy I asked to that concert. Nobody, don't ever buy Counting Crows tickets. Nobody wants to go with you. I got to do a really quick caveat before I start my story. It's a pre-story because you all know how this works now. And you're like, hear a story, eat a chocolate. Hear a story, eat a chocolate. And you're looking down at your plate and you're seeing white chocolate. And I know this for a fact. There are people out there who are white chocolate skeptics. And I know this, dear friends, because I was a white chocolate skeptic. Because I met Kala. And she said, can I give you some chocolate? And she held it out, and I said, oh, no, thank you. I hate white chocolate. And she said, I quote, that's because you've never had my white chocolate, which is, I think, the most baller thing you can say. And she gave it to me, and now I follow her on Instagram, and it's amazing. And you're all going to have that. So don't be, like, worrying about how this white chocolate is. It's really good. Trust me. Okay, and now the story. So I was 14, And I was very excited because my friends were coming over for an afternoon to play the board game Risk. And that should answer all of your questions about me at the age of 14. Now, back then, there was an ad on television for Risk. The announcer would say, "Risk, win the game and you win the world." And then, for whatever reason, at the end of the ad, the guy would change his voice and say, "Parker Brothers kinda fun." So I basically had two friends in the whole world, and I would call them up and I'd be like, "Excuse me, would you care for some Parker Brothers kinda fun?" And these dorks would come running, right? My two friends had the time and the interest to play a 7-hour board game. Okay, now this is August, the dog days of summer, or as we call it in Illinois, the fall. And it was the end of a really horrible summer break because I was between middle school and high school, and I was just dreading this change. It was going to be a bigger school, and I just knew I was going to be socially invisible. No one would notice me, because I had just gone through middle school and barely anyone noticed me there. I mean, I wound up with two dorks for friends, right? I just thought high school was going to be like, fighting a protracted land battle on multiple fronts in Asia, which any Risk player will tell you is a horrible, horrible way to lose. Okay, so I had a lot of anxiety about it. I just needed a calming afternoon of rolling dice for world domination to relax me. The one good thing that had happened that summer was my leg hair had started to come in. So that afternoon, I'm rocking a sweet pair of 80s short shorts, to show off the thigh fuzz. And I'm carrying Doritos and Jolt Cola out to the screened-in porch where I'm setting us up so me and the boys can have some Parker Brothers kind of fun. As I go from the living room to the porch, I hear a clap of thunder. But it's not like off in the distance. It's like I'm in the thunder. And then I see the sky falling like I'm Chicken Little. And I realize the glass door to the porch that I thought was open had been closed. I hadn't even felt it hit my head, but I had shattered it. And I look down, and there's just like a billion shards of glass everywhere. And I'm covered in blood. And I realize this is my blood. I'm bleeding from like everywhere. So I say, "Help?" Literally, like that with a question mark. So my dad comes running in. He sees his son covered head to toe in blood and says, "Oh, geez." That's the type of like fiery, impassioned, emotional response. That's the hallmark of men of the Midwest, right? Years later, I would tell him that he was going to be a grandfather for the first time, and his reaction was, "Neat." Okay, so then my mom comes in. She takes one look at me and immediately just starts screaming. And it's just like wordless bellow that is like so loud, woodland creatures miles from our home are like running for cover, right? She's terrified. And because she's terrified, now I'm terrified, so I start screaming. The second I start screaming, she stops and snaps into mom mode. And she's like, "Knock it off." So I'm cut on my arms, both of my semi-hairless legs, my chest. There's a gash right next to my eye, and there's this really deep cut on my hand. So my mom takes my right arm and she sticks it up over my head so that it's over my heart and it will bleed less. And then she looks to my dad and says, "We got to stop the bleeding. Go get some towels." He's like, "Okie dokie," and he goes off to the linen closet, right? And when he comes back, she's like, "Not the good towels." So they get the crummy towels and they start like applying pressure to all these cuts. And my dad notices on this really deep cut, there's like a shard of glass sticking out of it. So he pulls my hand down and he plucks the shard out, which, oh, you've seen this before, okay. Yeah, a geyser of blood starts shooting out everywhere, right? So my mom takes my hand and puts it back up, and now it's like there's a garden hose of my blood just like spraying the whole room. Okay, before I knew it, the whole house seemed to be filled with first responders, right? There's like 2 paramedics. They're like slapping bandages on me seemingly everywhere. And there's a cop who's like right in my face. And he's like, "What are you on, son?" Because I'm a teenage boy who's just walked through a sheet glass window. So in his cop brain, I have to be having smoked PCP or something, right? He's like, "The doctors need to know what you took. I don't know why the cop is Jack Nicholson tonight. I'm sorry. He's like, the doctors need to know what you took. And I'm like, I took some of the Doritos. At this point, his partner comes in from the porch, and he's holding up the game box for Risk, like it's evidence. And the first cop just like shuts his notepad, like, okay, case closed. This kid is definitely not cool enough to be doing drugs. And so the paramedics, they strap me onto the gurney and they start wheeling me out. And I'm like, but Matt and Tim are coming. And my dad is like, who? And my mom is like, his nerds. And she's like, I'll call their parents. It's fine. And so they wheel me out. They put me in the back of the ambulance with my dad. And when they close that door, that is when the shock wore off and the panic set in. Because they're taking me to the hospital. Like, I'm bleeding a lot. This is scary. This is like life-threatening. And then they threw on the lights and sirens, and I was a 5-year-old boy, like, woohoo, woohoo. I'm like, I don't care if I bleed out. I'm in an ambulance with the lights and sirens on. This is so exciting. I had wanted to be seen, and now I was like, they're rolling through town, and they were going to like wheel me into the ER, and I figured it'd be like on TV with all like the doctors shouting orders and everything. It was going to be all like focused on me. So the ambulance stops, and they open the door, and we're not at the ER. We're not even in the parking lot. We're on the road in front of the hospital because there's like a line of ambulances waiting to get in. And the paramedics are like, do you mind walking in? So when we get into the ER, it's packed. There's people like lining the halls, the lobby's full, and all of them have like bandages everywhere. And we go to the nurse's station, and she's like, tells us that the hospital is doing an emergency preparedness drill. And all these patients are actually volunteers from like the Lions Club or like Girl Scouts, and they're pretending to be victims of a fake tornado. And she's like, but it's a great day to come because we have snacks. So my dad is like, neat. He takes a Diet Coke, and we go off to the exam room. And they put me in the exam room, and my dad sits in the corner, pops open the Diet Coke, and the Cubs game is on. He's set for the day, right? And then we wait. And I'm like, okay, I've never been to an emergency room before, but I kind of thought it would feel more like, I don't know, an emergency? But I say to him, like, Dad, is it normal, to wait for this long? And he's like, it's going to be fine. It was not. Here's why. So I'm in a hospital that's filled with fake patients for this fake tornado, right? All these doctors are running around trying to quickly take care of these fake patients of the fake tornado. Meanwhile, my chart lands on their desk, and it says, 14-year-old boy, multiple lacerations, broken window, which, sounds a lot like something that might happen in a tornado. And obviously these doctors have to fake take care of the people who are more seriously injured. And like, a guy whose spine has been severed is a lot more important than some kid with a few cuts on him, except for the fact that, I was actually bleeding. Okay? When we got there, my bandages had like, spots of blood, but pretty soon they were completely soaked, and I was watching them get like darker and darker. And the panic came back because I'm like, okay, I'm not bleeding, but I am definitely oozing blood. And I don't know how long you can ooze blood before you die, right? Plus, I have cuts everywhere. I'm like, am I going to look like a jigsaw puzzle when this is over? So I'm freaking out. I'm like, I expected this at this point, I would have captured Alaska and be ready to invade Kamchatka. Instead, I'm looking at my crimson red bandages everywhere. And I say to Dad, I'm like, you got to go talk to the nurses. You got to do this. Because this was the only card I had to play to send the most mild-mannered man in America to go plead for life-saving care for his son. So he goes out to the nurses' station. But there's a line of people because they have told the fake victims that they should all be advocating for their health the way real patients were, and they're all screaming at the nurses. So the OGs guys is not going to get anywhere with them. So he comes back with another Diet Coke, and we wait. An hour goes by. At this point, I'm getting right with Jesus. I'm like, cause of death oozing, right? A doctor happens to walk past, looks in the doorway. When he sees me, this doctor says, "Oh, shit!" Which is not a thing you ever want to hear a doctor say. He's like, everyone, get in here. So they had like every med student in Illinois basically here for this drill. And this guy had been like showing them like, oh, you fix that fake broken arm or this pretend concussion. So they all like jam into this exam room like it's a clown car because they want to see the honest to God, like real patient, right? And they're crowding around me and he's like shouting out directions and they're like, they're like taking off my bandages and cleaning the wounds. They're like cutting me out of my clothes. And he tells them, we got to make sure that there's no embedded shards of glass. So I had wanted so badly for people to see me, and now I was surrounded by strangers who were literally inspecting every inch of my body with magnifying glasses. And these med students would be like, doctor, I see something. He's like, it's a zit, move on. What about pimple? Keep going, people. Literally every 14-year-old's worst nightmare. And then it's time for the sutures, okay? And they're all like, they can't wait to do this now. They're med students. And he's like, I need 15 in that leg. Let's do 9 over here. The cut on my hand is so big, he's having them like switch off every like 3 cuts or whatever. So I have like my arms and my legs, and they're surrounding me like a NASCAR pit crew doing a tire change. It's incredible. And then they get me all stitched up, and now I need fresh bandages. And this is when the nurses tell them they are out of bandages. Because they've been slapping them on the Lions Club out in the lobby all day. So some poor nurse has to run to the maternity ward where she comes back with the panties they give to women after childbirth. And the med students are just like taping this to my various points in my body. Now, they didn't touch the cut near my eye because it was too close and the doctor was worried, so he got a consultation. The head of the hospital comes in. There's all these like medical dignitaries here for this like drill. And he says, this is the top ophthalmologist in the state. And the other guy is like the premier plastic surgeon in the Midwest. And the ophthalmologist looks at my eye, makes sure there's no glass. He's like, you're gonna be fine. You're not gonna lose any vision. And then the plastic surgeon says, I'm gonna personally stitch you up so you don't have a scar. You'll keep your marquee idol good looks. And the head of the hospital leans down to me and he says, son, you are so fortunate that this happened to you today. And I look up at him covered in dry blood, zits, and pregnancy diapers, and I say, yeah, I was just thinking about how lucky I feel. So they send me home. I have like 96 stitches in 7 places, and I walk into the house. My mother has just finished mopping my blood off the ceiling, and she says, well, at least now you know what to tell people when they ask you what you did on your summer vacation. But the truth is, what I had done on my summer vacation was freak out about high school. I was worried about it. I was so convinced I was going to just appear invisible there. But I just spent an afternoon seeing that being the center of attention is not always the greatest thing. And then there was a knock on the door. And it was my risk buddies, because they were worried about me. Yeah. I was worried that like high school is going to be this like unwinnable battle. But the way you win at risk is to slowly build up your numbers. And sure, this was going to be a war, but at least I knew I was starting it with 2 allies. So I took the boys out to the porch. My mom brought us some fresh Doritos. And we all had some Parker Brothers kind of fun.
Give it up for Ron. Fantastic. Freshman year of college, I went and visited a buddy at University of Iowa, and we were walking. I just got there, and there was a drop ceiling, like the tiles, like the metal frame. And someone said, bet you can't hit your head on that ceiling. I said, yeah, I can. And I jumped, and my head went through the tile, and then my eyebrow caught the metal strip. Big gash, got a scar. I can show it to you later. Thanks. Pretty good trip. So, in homage to Ron never being noticed, white chocolate is often maligned. It's often sidelined, as Ron so put at the beginning. People think it's, quote, not chocolate, but it comes from the exact same plant as chocolate. So this is the white chocolate piece. This is number 3. This is the Ashkenazi white chocolate nibble bar. So Ashkenazi handcrafts their single origin white chocolate with 34% cocoa butter, which they press themselves from cocoa beans sourced directly from farmers in the Philippines. They integrate this single origin cocoa butter with certified organic cane sugar and goat's milk powder to create real bean-to-bar white chocolate, adding Davo, Philippines roasted cocoa nibs, to the back of the bar. The nibs are from the same batch of beans used to make the bar itself, so in just one bite, you can taste the entire story from sourcing to production. Let's all dive in. I like white chocolate. This is excellent. And they're selling them in the lobby. Only the holidays were coming up, and everyone had to think of gifts and things to buy. Man, how convenient would that be? What a day. All right. You've heard 3. I'll make it up to you. You've heard 3. Last one right here. So our final teller came to me through the California Science Center, where he served as curator of aerospace science since 1990. In 1991, he began planning a display of a flown space shuttle orbiter that culminated in NASA awarding the Space Shuttle Endeavour to the California Science Center 2 decades later. Love that. He's taught numerous courses in astrophysics, planetary geology, space exploration to primary and secondary school students, and is an adjunct professor of the practice of physics and astronomy at the University of Southern California, where he teaches freshmen a seminar entitled The Space Shuttle and Our Place in the Universe. Through the USC Prison Education Program, he also teaches introductory astronomy to students in correctional facilities, and he loves model trains and swimming and bulldogs, obviously. And he is genuinely one of the kindest people you could ever meet. Please give me a very warm welcome to our last teller, Mr. Ken Phillips.
That's about right. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? How you guys doing? Everybody good? Okay, so I want you to take a trip with me. We're going to go back to Randallstown, Maryland. It was a small town about 10 miles west of the city of Baltimore. It's 1954. I'm 5 years old. And my very best friend, Lou Tucker, and I were going to be spending the week together. The Randallstown was this amazing place. This is 1954. It's like a page out of a Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn story. It's that kind of place. It's like rolling hills. It's got forests. Inside the forest, the dads cut out a space for a baseball diamond where we could play. It's got streams. You can catch frogs. We could throw rocks at bats all night long. We'd never hit one. All kinds of cool stuff you can do. The coolest thing about Randallstown was that this was a place where you could ride your bike. And Mr. and Ms. Tucker only had one rule. That was be safe. Actually, there were 4 rules. Number 1, be careful. Number 2, don't go on the main road. Number 3, watch for cars. And number 4, be home by dinner. So that was it. We were free to go. So we went up on our bicycles to this place called Deerhead Farm. And the reason we went to Deerhead Farm because we're cowboys, because we're 5 years old. And there were horses on Deerhead Farm. And we would see these kids riding the horses because we'd pass back and forth between this place dozens of times in Mr. and Mrs. Tucker's car. And it was so much fun. And we're 5 years old, and we're cowboys, and cowboys ride horses. That's what they do. So we got on our bikes, and we rode up to Deerhead Farm, and we right up Winans Road, left turn on Old Court Road. We get to Deerhead Farm, and we lay our bikes down. And then we climb up under this long white fence they had that was a petition to keep the horses in. So we climb up on the fence, and we wave to an attendant. The attendant comes over, and he says, "Hey, guys, what can I do?" And we said, "We're here to ride the horses at Deerhead Farm. This is such a fun place that we want to ride the horses." And he says, "Well, sorry, guys, white only." And we says, "Well, white only, what does that mean?" And he said, "You have to be a white person to ride a horse here at Deerhead Farm." So we said, "Well, are we white?" And he said, "No, you guys are colored." He was very kind with that. He could have said, gone a lot of places with that, but he said, "You guys are colored." So we said, "Okay." And we went off and did probably 100 other things we could have done. Now, it wasn't an offensive thing, but it felt weird. It didn't just feel white. It felt weird. And I can't really explain why except this. If the guy had said, "Look, you got to be 4 feet tall," I could have understood that, because you're either 4 feet tall or you're not. But he didn't say that. What he said was, "You can't come in because I see you differently than I see other people." And that didn't make any sense to me, because kids are kids. And they looked at it, they were having fun. How could I be different? And that stuck with me for a while. Because what he told me was, "I'm not going to give you permission to do something that you want to do." And I didn't understand why that permission wasn't given. Now, that misunderstanding, or lack of understanding on my part, I should say, didn't last long. Because this is America in the 1950s. And I could remember hearing my mom and dad talk about all the hoops they had to jump through and all the stuff they had to do, how clever they had to be just to get done the things they needed to get done in life. They were some very clever people. And I was also remembering on the news and on the radio, you would hear things like these kids, black kids in a place called Little Rock, Arkansas, and they were confronted with a whole lot of difficulty in getting to the high school that they were supposed to go to. So very quickly, I put this together, and I said, now, you know, there are two societies here, and one of those societies really doesn't want very much to do with me. And they don't want to give me permission to function fully in the broader context of society. The other society, which was primarily people who looked pretty much like me, were saying, you know something, there is a way for you to get around this, and we're going to show you how to do that. We're going to show you how to do that. Okay, so time goes on. I go to Garrison Junior High School. Garrison Junior High School was a place that was just recently integrated, just like those places in Arkansas, but fortunately with a lot less fanfare and no violence. So I'm there, it's about 1960, the fall of 1960. And I'm in junior high. That was called 7th grade. Absolutely disastrous year. Not because anybody was particularly unkind. Some people were actually quite nice. Most were indifferent. A few were pretty mean. The teachers, by and large, were in the indifferent category. And I wasn't flourishing. I wasn't interested in anything. I didn't want to do anything. I hated school, and I was awfully bad at it. I had an uncle, William Wade Phillips Jr., Uncle Billy, who happened to be a physicist. Got his degree from Temple University in 1932 in physics, did his graduate work in 1933 and 1934, and he was a teacher. He was a great high school teacher. He was a great friend. And I think that he was a secret weapon that my mom and dad had, because he lived in D.C., and he happened to come over. They had told Uncle Billy that I was having difficulty in school. So he comes up to me and he says, Kenny Bunkport, I got a deal for you. He says, I'm going to pay you $10 a week to come to Washington and help me move my physics lab from one end of the Francis Cardoza High School to the other end, because they've redone the school and I got to move my stuff before the beginning of the academic year. Now, my allowance at the time was $1 a week. 10 times something is an order of magnitude. That's what we call that in physics. Man, we're going to move some shit. We're going to D.C. So I go over to D.C. Uncle Billy and I come up early one morning. It took us 2 weeks to do this. Cardoza High School was huge. It's big. I remember this big stone facade, and it had the wings on it and everything. So we go into the main door. We go up a couple of stairs, down a few hallways, and Uncle Billy turns the key, and he opens the door to a wonderland. This was his physics lab. And the first thing I noticed about it was everything in the lab was metal. It was mostly metal stuff, but it was delicate-looking, very precisely made metal stuff. And that really got my attention. Then we started playing with things. And he was demonstrating all of these things. He put on a Van de Graaff generator. And this spark, just like Frankenstein, moving like that. It was amazing. And I love Frankenstein movies. And then he started showing me other pieces of apparatus, springs, and there were pulleys. There were inclined planes. They were like cars that would go down inclined planes. And the thing that was most memorable was there's a thing called an air track. If you've ever seen an air track, it's about as long as this stage. And it's metal, and it has small holes in it. And air blows through the holes. So you can take this little car, and you can put it on the air track, and you just tap it, and it goes all the way down the track very slowly, hits the other end, because it's got a spring, comes all the way back very slowly, hits the other end, comes about halfway back, and then finally stops. And it just blew me away. What it told me, by the end of the time I was with Uncle Billy in that lab, I knew every piece of equipment in it, and I knew how it worked. And what I mostly learned about was physics, because I'd always asked Uncle Billy, what do you mean when you say you're a physicist? And he tried to explain it. It didn't make any sense to me. Physics was one of the things you did when you want to see how the invisible stuff in the world controls the visible stuff you can see. That's a look behind the curtain. And I was absolutely hooked. I was elated. That was my thing. I was going to become a physicist until I hit 8th grade algebra. The next year, Garrison Junior High School. It was the worst feeling in my life. I can recreate it now with ease. Algebra is the key to our modern intellectual understanding of the world. Other things build upon it, but that's the key. And I knew that I had to pass algebra. I had to get that, or physics wasn't going to be a thing for me. And I can remember the problem sets I get. I was so lost in the algebra class, I didn't even know what questions to ask. Weeks went by. You only got 16, 15 or so weeks in the semester, and about a quarter of the semester was gone. I was having an incredibly difficult time with this class. And I took a problem set home, and I will never forget this. Never will I forget this. I'm sitting at the dining room table. I'd gotten home a little early. I take out this problem set. I look at it. I can't get anywhere with it. I don't know how the first thing to do with these problems. And I'm looking at them, and I just feel completely lost. I'd spent hours, literally hours, trying to figure this stuff out. And I had this vision, and I can recreate it right now so clearly. It's like I'm standing on this dock, right? And the dock is really long, and my friends are on a boat. They're at the end of the dock, and this boat's about to take off. It's leaving. And if I don't make that boat, I'm going to be left behind, and they're going to go off. Their dreams are going to be fulfilled, and I'm not going to do anything worthwhile. Physics is not going to be a part of my life. And then the tears came, and then more tears came, and then more tears came, and then more tears came, and then the hours went by, and I'm looking at these problems, and finally the tears stopped. And the place got like surreally quiet. You know, this background noise you hear, even that disappears. And I looked at the page, and I swear to God, I looked at the equation, and the thing, it almost just kind of just emerged from the page, and the whole logic of algebra just became absolutely crystal clear to me. The equal sign said, "Thou shalt not violate me." Whatever happens on the left side of that equal sign has got to be balanced on the right, or it's an inequality. It's not going to work. And when I looked at the equations, most of the stuff, at least though Algebra 1, was collected on what was the right side of the equal sign. And when I looked at it, I realized, oh, wait a minute. This is a recipe. It's an instruction. It's telling me what to do. Some of the little things there are variables. They change. Duh, they're variables. Others are constants. They don't change. The way the equations are written will simply say, this is when you do a thing, this is how many times you do it, and this is the order in which you have to do it. It's a recipe. It solves itself. It was amazing. I'd never seen anything like that. Now, what I learned from that experience is that I could learn. I didn't know the human mind had the ability to take chaos and render order out of it. I didn't know it could do that. I didn't know that was a thing. And so that to me was a real epiphany. So now I had physics as something that I loved, and I had at least crossed the first threshold for the mathematics, which is the language of physics that I wanted to do. I had those two things. Now they weren't merged together. That doesn't happen until college, but I had the math and I had the physics, at least a little bit of each. So from that point on, math went from a nightmare to my very favorite subject. Algebra 2 was a breeze. Algebra 2 was the end of my year at Garrison. Went from there to Baltimore City College High School, where I took my geometry, loved it, trigonometry, loved it even more because I love triangles, and then analytic geometry and calculus, really fell in love with that, a little bit of calculus, differential calculus. And I graduated from City College, and I got into this place, North Carolina A&T State University, where I did my undergraduate work. It's an historically black college. It's in Greensboro. It was a place from which Jesse Jackson graduated. It was a place where in 1960 and 1961, shortly before I got there, where the guys were sitting at the Woolridge counter, and they wouldn't get up because it was the first of the sit-ins. That was the school, and it was known for its physics department, and its ag school, and its nursing. So I go there, and I'm really elated, but it didn't last long, because I look around and I say, oh, wait a minute, this is a big deal. This is real. I mean, this is not just high school. I'm going to either make it or break it in this place. This is going to be my basis. And it was seriously a place where, I mean, every subject had its own building. So the mathematics building was just math, and the physics building was all physics in there. Chemistry had its own building. I mean, it was a campus, it was big. And there were a lot of people there, thousands. And it was in the South. And some of the Southern accents were hard for me to pick up on. I didn't know anybody, and I felt very much alone. And so I went from a state of elation to this state of real sadness and depression. I don't know that I can do this. And I would think back sometime about these knuckleheads when I was in high school. Dorks, Phillips, you ain't never gonna do anything in physics. You're not getting into A&T, this, that, and the other. And I think, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't have it. So one evening, it's about 9 o'clock, it had just gotten dark. I hear this knock on my dorm door. I open the door. I don't know anybody in the place. Don't know who it could be. When I opened the door, there was this very tall, extremely thin, tremendously distinguished-looking African-American gentleman with a bow tie, a white shirt, a jacket, a crowbar in one hand and a hammer in the other, and 5 students with him. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, you don't see this every day. And he says, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Professor Donald Edwards. I'm the chair of the physics department here at North Carolina A&T State University. I want to welcome you warmly to our department. And I ask that you join me on a little adventure. So this is the night. Professor Edwards walks us across the campus. We had to walk the whole diagonal length of the campus because the physics building was in the northeast corner of the campus. So we go up there, and he's looking around like this, and he takes out his keys when we get to Cherry Hall, which was where physics was, and he sneaks us in through the side door of the building. And I look in, and I could tell the building was under a little bit of construction. We probably shouldn't have been in there. So we went into the building, we went up some stairs, down a hallway, and what did we go into? We went into a physics lab. When I looked into the lab, I recognized everything that was in there. But we weren't there to do physics. We were there to steal. What might we steal, you could ask? Well, we were there to steal blackboards because there was an array of blackboards in this lab, and Professor Edwards insisted that each of his students, his new freshman students, would have their own blackboard for study in their dorm room. So he took the crowbar and he took the hammer, and we yanked 6 blackboards off that wall. And they were heavy. These were real blackboards. I mean, these were blackboards. Not this wimp stuff they've got today. And we schlepped them across the campus. And Edwards, I never saw him smile once in 4 years, but he was the kindest person on earth. He helped us schlep those things into our dorm rooms. Each student got one. He helped us put them up on the wall, and then he said to us this. He said, look, you are here for one reason. That is to leave with a degree in physics. I don't want to see you playing around. I want you to study. I want you to work with each other. I want you to use these blackboards as the focus of your community. I want you to argue with each other over the concepts, and when you have 10 equations to solve for a homework assignment, I want you to do 20, because that's what you're going to need to make it. And then he says, gentlemen, I teach the senior course in X-ray diffraction. And you will certainly take that course when you get to be seniors. There will be no options. And then very quietly, he just slipped off into the night, wished us well. Those blackboards were immensely useful to us, and we did them and used them exactly as Professor Edwards had intended. And what he had given us was community. That's what he gave us. 4 years later, after having met Dr. Edwards, A&T graduated 400 students from across all of its divisions. Of those 400 students, 6 of us got degrees in physics, and I was one of the 6. Now, I have been teaching physics in some form or another for about 38 years to people of all ages, both in classic formal classroom learning as well as at the Science Center, which is an informal learning. And students ask me all kinds of questions. And they ask physics questions, which are fun to answer, but they also ask me a different kind of question. And that question is fundamentally this: is it going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to make this? Because they're all scared, just like I was when I was a kid. I was scared. And I can answer with some certainty when I respond to them. I say, you know something, nobody can really tell you how your life is going to work out. It's just too complex. There are too many variables, you know that. But you have agency in what you do. And that agency begins with you saying that you're not going to give up, that you're not going to quit. And if you don't give up, then I think what you will find is the odds are in your favor, because a very few people who will give you permission have a great deal more power than an army of people who try to tell you what you can't do. And therein lies your salvation. So I want to thank you, Professor Edwards. I want to thank you, Uncle Billy, and I want to thank you.
Give it up for Ken. I love that. Just in talking with Ken, it's how about this, how about that? Like, there's so much. We want Ken back, don't we? Yes, we do. Just working with him reminded me, one of my favorite words is the word sonder, S-O-N-D-E-R, the sudden realization that, like, everyone around you has such a rich and complex life, like the switch kind of goes off, and I had that now. Thank you very much, Ken. That was wonderful. Let's talk chocolate. So this is an homage, last piece, to the truths that are out there, all right? How we can sometimes think that we know something, but there's a hidden wonder lying right beneath. We have Spinnaker, 70% dark chocolate with ghost chili salt out of Seattle, Washington. Seattle's family-owned, award-winning Spinnaker chocolate takes an intensely scientific approach to the production process. They spent years researching, testing, and iterating on thousands of different variables to dial in their manufacturing. Perhaps the biggest distinction is their dedication to roasting nibs instead of whole beans. This bar uses Columbia cacao and is dark and fudgy with a strong kick of spicy ghost chili-infused salt. The ghost chili really sneaks up on you at the end, not overwhelming the yummy flavor of the cacao, but also definitely asserting its independence and authority. Did someone just go, ow? The salt gives a nice balance to the entire bar. I have a condition called baby mouth. It's not recognized by the FDA, but I'm doing this anyway, so if I can, you can. Oh, yeah. That's some ghost chili. That's not what you want to do right before you read the thank yous. All right. That's lovely. Oh, it's not too strong at all. The salt and the heat, that's great. Please give one more round of applause to all our tellers. We have Sophie, Joanne, Ron, and Ken right up here. It is no small feat to do something like this. If this is something you would like to do, you can pitch us at storycollider.org. We have workshops available all around the place. You can sign up for updates there. Thank you to everyone at LAist. So we have John Cohn, VP of Audience and Community Engagement, Becca Stummy back there who opened the show, Tony Federico back there, the man behind the curtain, Kristen Ranger, events coordinator who's helping hand out chocolate, Michael Leva, tech assistant, and Ellie Montenegro. Ellie Montenegro is our the events intern. This is her last event. Yeah, she's the best. Thank you again to the Chocolate Dispensary and Tasting Room, Dale and Kala. They host regular tasting events at their store. Their cafe will be open soon with coffee and drinking chocolate. You can also book them for private chocolate tastings in your home, office, other location. Ask them about hosting at their store. You can buy the pre-made bundles of everything you tasted here in the lobby. You can buy them individually. They brought a bunch of other stuff around. Be ready for the holiday season. Thank you for letting us make a good first impression on you. We hope we did. Time Tell the tellers how much you love their stories. I know I did. We'll see you next year. Sign up. Please come back. I already miss you. Happy holidays. Be safe. We're all going to be okay. I love you. Goodbye.